All right, then. Good evening and welcome to the Walk of Kings. That's the WoK, the Way of Kings of Kings.
Yes, sir.
I am FellGnomen, and this is my dear brother, Sensei Milo. How are you doing
Hello.
tonight, Milo?
I am doing quite fine. It is a little toasty here. Nothing too crazy, but we're getting
How
along.
warm is it? How warm is it where you are?
It is about 75 and sunny outside. I do have a little air conditioning going on.
Yep.
Don't think it should be picked up by the microphone,
Oh
but
yeah, I'm not hearing any of it.
I just got back from a trip to Virginia this weekend where it was 89 degrees with, I believe it was 91% humidity.
Wow.
So anything better than that is okay with me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about the same temperature here, and it was edging up to 100 or so recently. So I'm happy to be dozens of degrees cooler than that.
Absolutely.
Now we're here today. This is, I mean, previously on this channel, I've really just streamed games, but it came to my attention that both of us were doing a reread of The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I thought, oh, that's a great opportunity to get together and do a chapter by chapter reread podcast.
Yeah.
And it
And
was just
maybe
great timing.
maybe Stormlight season 2, as it were, will be done by the time we finish Way of Kings.
Yeah, that might be possible.
Chapter
And
by
however,
chapter.
was it 5 years? Was it that it's
Yeah,
predicted before the next one will be out?
I believe that's the case.
Yeah, and we still don't know why Kaladin was called Son of Tanavast. Maybe we'll
Specifically.
get
Yeah.
maybe we'll get filled in sometime in the future. But for now, we're actually not going to start the podcast itself today. This is a tech demo. It did just kind of occur to me after we started that I may be getting maybe some mic hiss coming through because I see my audio never seems to go really below negative 40 decibels. So thankfully we don't have anybody actually watching at the moment, but that'll be something to check
Yeah.
for later.
Um,
Your
I
audio is perfectly fine on my end though.
yeah, I do have a hover around negative 52 decibels.
Yeah.
That's probably the AC going in the background, but that should be below any observable decibel
Yeah,
range.
we'll see. And I'll when it comes to
Yeah.
putting the
Yeah, yeah.
VODs on YouTube, I'll do actual processing of them.
Yeah. This is, to be clear, the episode -1. There
Yeah,
will
yeah,
be
yeah.
things that change from this episode to the next one. But we're just gonna kind of do some introductions, talk about Sanderson a little bit, as if many other people have not done that already. But talk about his stuff, what we like, some thoughts on his overall stuff, maybe some other books that we have listened to that may, give us some differing opinions on his writing and kind of overall what we've consumed from his library.
So what's our first topic, Milo?
So our first topic is pretty straightforward. How each of us started reading Sanderson. I will let you go first because you started before I did.
Right. It's hard for me to remember exactly how I started. I think when maybe I was in late high school or had just graduated high school, I was looking for recommendations for fantasy books, and among the recommendations I was getting was specifically The Way of Kings. Among other things that, when I look in hindsight, it's a little comical, the comparison. One of the other ones that I was getting a strong recommendation for was Steven Erikson, I think that's his name, his Malazan Book of the Fallen series, which I think the first book is Gardens of the Moon, which is
Not
a
sure I'm familiar with that one.
incredibly dense and incredibly thick series. that I just bounced immediately off of. It was
Sure.
horrifyingly dense and boring to me. It was like every chapter it seemed we were getting a completely new character, and it felt like it took forever for us to get back to any of them. And granted, at the time I was coming off of I was a pretty immature reader for a long time. I was reading mostly like middle grade books. It took a long time for me
Yeah.
to get into reading like actual like, even young adult, let alone adult books. But so I kind of went from pretty underdeveloped reading habit for that age to one of the worst ways I could possibly try to get into actual fantasy. Like, this is a series where it was recommended to me to get the Kindle version so I could get a custom dictionary so I could look up terms as I was
Oh
reading.
no. That is a
Yeah.
little telling of the experience that you're going to step into.
Yeah, it was. I won't say it was bad because I mean, well, first of all, it was years since I
Yeah.
years since I tried, so I don't. Lots and lots of people love it, so I'm sure it's actually really good. But it was not for me, and I've never tried going back to it since. But it was around that time I think I tried initially getting into the Way of Kings because I thought I was a really advanced reader, not knowing what I didn't know, and tried to get into it and was like, wow, this also kind of sucks. And then someone recommended that I try Mistborn instead and said that Way of Kings is really intended for after you've read some other more accessible Sanderson stuff. And I really liked Mistborn. Um, and I was hooked through the Mistborn trilogy. I think I read Elantris also before reading Way of Kings, maybe. I've had a very love and hate relationship with Sanderson. I really, really like some of his books. I really, really don't like some of his other books, even in Stormlight itself.
Yeah.
Even at this point, I'm not that big a fan of Way of Kings. But then I love Words of Radiance. Oathbringer is in my top 10 all time favorite books list. And then I really didn't like Rhythm of War and really, really didn't like Wind and Truth.
Fair enough.
And that's it. I cannot predict whether I'll like or not like a Sanderson book. I loved Mistborn Era 1, I still do. I really don't like Mistborn Era 2. Still haven't read the final book, but I really liked Shadows of Self. I thought the vibe was immaculate there. How
Yeah,
about your?
his
Oh,
the
sorry.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say the even within one trilogy, like even within the first Mistborn era one trilogy,
Mhm.
the feeling of like the tone of the book can jump all over the place.
Mm.
I have a friend that I introduced to this series. He very much likes Mistborn Book One. He very much does not like Mistborn Book Two. I think it took him a half dozen tries to
Yep.
get past the first like 10 chapters of
Mm.
Book Two, and then he thought Book Three was pretty okay.
Mm.
So even within one self-contained era of one of his series, it can vary. So I think
Yeah.
that's pretty reasonable to say.
I really wish that Brandon had a better editor currently, and even though his editor he had for the longest time, I think did a pretty admirable job, all things considered, I still wish that he had a heavier editing hand.
Yeah,
His books
I
are
don't
just much
disagree.
longer than they need to be, always.
Ooh, it's almost like a rule for him. Yeah. So myself, I am a couple years younger, and it would stand to reason that my reading level is just a tad behind yours, kind of historically up until we
We did grow
grew
up in
up
the same
in.
house, so that makes sense. Reading the
Yeah,
same books for the most part.
yeah. The local library had a couple of really decent kind of middle, like just younger than young adults
Yeah, middle
series that
grade.
I think I read.
It's
Yeah.
some really good series, like Ranger's
So
Apprentice and all the Owen Colfer stuff.
yeah,
That was good
um,
books, just, you know,
yeah,
homeschooling does stuff to
fairly
you.
fairly approachable in terms
Yes.
of reading and comprehension and stuff like that. So for a while, I kind of read the same kind of books. We grew up listening to audiobooks very frequently.
Mm.
So even as a young child, I was no stranger to listening to a quote unquote book on tape, which is a phrase that I was reminded of when I was in Virginia,
Yeah.
and it is so quaint. But so I was introduced to Sanderson through you, actually. We took a road trip
Mm-hmm.
to prepare ourselves to go to Ohio
Mm-hmm.
for an event. And
For the wedding of the friend who introduced me to Brandon Sanderson. So it all comes
oh,
full
really?
circle. Yeah, yeah.
That's funny. So we decided to test ourselves by doing basically an overnight, like halfway driving session.
Yeah. It
And
wasn't
we were
fun.
chatting. It was something that we did, and I'm happy that we had the experience
Yeah.
together.
That car didn't have cruise control, did it?
It did not. So we babysat the pedal.
Yeah.
It was an experience. We're a decent way into the drive. We still got many hours to go, talking about some different books and stories that we like. And I believe you had asked if you could throw on the first couple of chapters of this interesting book that you think that I would like. It's very long, so if I like it, then there's a lot more of it to consume. And if I don't like it, then the author has written a couple of other books that I may like instead. But we'll check it out. And this was the prologue and I believe the first couple of chapters of The Way of Kings.
Oh gosh, what a cruel brother I was. Deliberately put on a book that it took me several tries to get through, knowing that you couldn't escape.
Hey, you
I'm
know
so
what?
sorry.
I could have turned around and we I could have turned the book off if I needed to. But I really enjoyed it. I was very tired, and I believe my recollection was a guy in an Iron Man suit of armor wielding something akin to a lightsaber fighting a dragon.
That's pretty
Which
much what
is,
happened.
I mean, that's basically it right there.
Yeah, that's the
You know,
aftermath of or the pre-math. That's what was happening right before the opening opened, right?
I believe so. So, that was how I got introduced to Sanderson as a whole, just kind of that nugget of chapters. And I believe it was several months later that I asked you what book it was that we had listened to because I was curious. And my. The way that I listened to Sanderson, which is actually something that we'll get to in a little bit, is kind of our reading habits specifically with Sanderson. I chewed through his content very quickly. I had a lot of time every day that I could listen to audiobooks, and I did that. So I consumed the first three books of the Stormlight Archive in essentially record time. I chewed through the first three Mistborn books in record time. I got most of the way through Mistborn Era 2 in pretty record time as well, and then I kind of slowed down at a certain point. But yeah, I've kind of there have been breaks here and there, but I've been pushing through pretty strongly. There are definitely quite a few things that I don't particularly like about some of his more recent works, but
Which you've read a
overall,
lot more of than I have, because I could
I
see from
have,
a mile away that it was nonsense I didn't want any part of.
yeah, a couple of the
Not in like a political sense, but just in
no, yeah,
he needs a better editor.
yeah, a couple of the secret project books I have dug into, and I believe we listened to the first 10 minutes of one of them, and
I
you
was done.
asked politely if we could turn it off and listen to something else. So, yeah, overall,
Yep.
I would say that I am a pretty good, a pretty faithful Sanderson consumer. For a period of time, I would say that I was a very large fan of his, but there are other artists and other books out there, and I think that my overall consumption has kind of given me a better perspective on where he lies and things. But I will agree, Oathbringer is in my top 10 books as well. It is a fantastic
It
novel.
is such a fantastic climax to all the stuff that came before it. It's only great because of all the stuff that went into building it up. Like
Yeah.
I,
It is.
it's not just
It
like
is
it
the.
has an awesome fight scene, and I'm sitting here like,
Mhm.
oh, look at my Lorbos punching the
Yeah.
bad guy. It's no, this
It.
is just thousands of pages of
Mhm.
okay-ish character development have built up to something that's really enjoyable.
It is. This isn't 100% a comparison, but it's kind of like when the first Avengers movie came out, right?
Hmm.
Up until that point, there
Specifically,
hadn't
the first
really.
Avengers.
Yes, specifically the first Avengers, because up until that point, there hadn't really been a connected cinematic universe.
Hmm.
So we had the first two Iron Man movies. We had the Incredible Hulk,
Hmm.
2008. We had Captain America: The First Avenger, and Thor. And those movies on their own, some were better than others, I will
Hmm.
say. Looking at you, Iron Man 2,
Oof.
you are not one of the better ones. Um, but when it all ties together and you can see that, oh, that's right, this character did pop up in this movie and in this one, and everybody came together and it was really something special.
Yeah.
And now all of the movies after
And then just like
Avengers
Marvel,
kind
the
of,
series just kept going.
it just
And
kept going trying to
so
cash
did
in on that feeling that we had the first time.
Stormlight. And
Yeah.
at least for Stormlight, I don't know, there I could draw some parallels between big moments that Marvel
Mhm.
finally got around to that you have to sit through too many dumb movies to get to. There's we'll get to it at some point. Anyway,
Yeah.
so you mentioned that you kind of have a broader perspective on fantasy books or maybe just books in general after having
Sure.
read more. What are some of the books you had in mind?
Yeah, so after listening to Sanderson
Mm.
for that amount of time, like I said, he was kind of the person that I was listening to for a majority of the time.
Mm.
I did take a break from listening to audiobooks for a little bit, maybe a year or two. Excuse me, but something that I have been digging into quite a bit recently have been Warhammer 40k
Mm-hmm.
books, which may make some people laugh, some cringe,
Well,
or
anybody who likes Sanderson shouldn't laugh or cringe at 40K because I know the things that make them cheer. What's funny,
yeah,
given the context of me introducing you into Brando Sando on a car ride
yes,
with an audiobook,
yes,
is when I was driving Elijah up to Dad's, I made him listen to The Talon of Horus by Aaron Dembski Bowden, and he ended up really enjoying it and then getting a whole bunch more books. And now he's listened to a whole bunch more 40K books than I have. Similar to how I forced you to listen to Way of Kings, and now you've listened to more Sanderson books than I have.
yeah. You're just
I do be guiding others to a treasure I am too lazy to possess.
oh man, bringing it back to the Avengers, huh?
Yeah,
Um,
it all comes back to
so,
biggest
oh jeez,
media phenomenon.
just
Whatever,
keeps going, doesn't it?
it never stops going.
So specifically, there are a couple of 40k books that I will name drop to kind of give a sense of what has kind of broadened my
Is
scope
one of
of
them The
fantasy
Talon of
books.
Horus by Aaron Dembski
One of
Bowden?
them is, in fact, The Talon of Horus by ABD. It is a fantastic book. It was my introduction to Warhammer 40k
It's a heck of an introduction.
as a franchise. I was vaguely aware of some things through exposure to you and the
Mm-hmm.
memes and all that kind of thing. Like I knew that there was an emperor and the warp and things like that. But I really dove into it kind of head first with the Talon of Horus, and I've now consumed a good handful of different books. I'm continuing to go. Um, The Talon of Horus is the first one. The second one would be Hell's Reach, also by ABD.
I don't like
If
that one
you,
as much for my limited
I
exposure.
Yes, which is fair. It is certainly not for everybody, but the kind of militaristic procedural that it gives from a first and third person view, I really enjoy the kind of uh, interaction between the Marines and the local guardsmen and stuff like that in a very specific single battle in a very specific place.
Mm-hmm.
In other books we get, for example, the Siege of Terra covers years and years and years of action, whereas Hell's Reach is like I think 4 months worth of battle.
Mm.
But it gives me this feeling that the author, knows where he wants to put his characters for character moments, and it is natural that they get from point A to point B, which is something that we may talk about in
Mm.
as we
And
go through
oh,
Sanderson.
you have no idea what's coming later in the series.
Um,
I
the third, the third and last Warhammer book. Forgive me here. I am blanking on the name. Just a second. The third and last of the Warhammer books that I really enjoy is actually one of the Siege of Terra books. It
yes.
is The First Wall, which I believe is novel 3 of the Siege of Terra series.
Mm.
And it is. What I like about it is it ties together some very large scale, um, like orbital craft bombardment kind of thing, as well as getting Primarchs interacting with each other as the battle actually starts to hit the ground of Terra. But
Mm.
also, we get a very neat first person narration of a conscripted trooper traveling from the southern tip of Africa to the Appalachian Plains to
Wow.
get to the palace. And there's this I feel like there's this very nice balance of large scale commanders making decisions that doom tens of thousands of soldiers to their death, and
Mm.
then this one character trudging through the snow because their land raider broke down, you
Mm.
know and the moments that we get with the single character feel appropriate to go with the single character, and the moments that are large scale feel appropriate for large scale. And it never feels to me like there's an inappropriate moment in either of those two contrasting scales.
Interesting. I'll maybe get to it someday, but just the size of the Horus Heresy series. How many books did they
Yes,
end up with?
I believe there are in total. I may be wrong about this, so I'm actually going to look it
Yeah,
up
because
right
they
now.
did just announce the series is continuing after, was it the end and the end and the death, was that the
The
end
three
of?
part and yes,
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're continuing after that, but like if you ignore the fact they're continuing because money is cool and can be exchanged for goods and services, was it like
yes.
45 books?
As of right now, there are
Oh,
64 books top to bottom of
they're just straight up
the Horus
making
Heresy.
a Warhammer Bible.
The Horus Heresy series is book 1 to book 54. It then shifts to the Siege of Terra series, which is really
Gotcha.
just the end cap to it, which is book 55 to 64.
Gotcha.
Um, and we do get there are various authors through this. That is one of the things that I kind of like about
Mm,
the Warhammer series. Mr. Dan Abnett is one
mm.
of the standout authors that
Yep.
I really enjoy. Aaron Dembski Bowden does pop up quite a bit, as well as Guy Haley. Those are some of the standout authors.
I'm not familiar with
As
Guy Haley. I'll have to look into him.
certainly among others, Miss Gav Thorpe, Chris
Yeah.
Wright, Graham McNeil,
Mm-hmm.
good scattering of people, but
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
64
ADB's
books in
has
total.
so many books. ADB has written his style at like a sentence and paragraph level has stood above the other writers that I've sampled looking through various Black Library books. And I really appreciate that he
I
just
would
writes
generally
good
agree.
pages.
Yeah. Yes.
And
How
yeah,
about yourself? What is your kind of wider
um, well, we're on the
literary consumption?
yeah. Mine is extremely eclectic. I read a ton of stuff that I don't even think I'm going to enjoy, and sometimes I don't enjoy it. Sometimes I do, and then I find there's something new that I do enjoy. One of the There was a writing class that I took a long time ago where I really disagreed with like everything the writer or the teacher actually said and didn't get much out of the instruction. But like I was an idiot, arrogant teenager, so I emailed him saying like, why are you disagreeing with all these other like modernist craft writers that I'm reading about?
Yeah.
And he gave a very reasonable, immature response. But essentially he said, for an example of how some of the things I'm saying can work well, I suggest you read uh, I can't remember if he recommended to me Gone Girl or Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, but Gillian Flynn ended up being one of my favorite writers. She writes like crime thriller, domestic fiction,
Yeah.
and there's dozens upon dozens of people have tried to essentially emulate her, and uh, have none of them have quite matched up. In my opinion, I've certainly searched long and hard for something that scratches the same itch and haven't quite found it. But it's funny that I went through that course, and the best thing I got out of the course was just a book recommendation from the guy.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes the book recommendation is the friends we made along the way.
It really is. It really was Journey Before Destination in that case. Before we veer back into Way of Kings,
Yeah.
I honestly haven't read much 40K. I started with the recommendation of The Emperor's Gift. I can't remember who wrote that. It might have been ADB, actually. I didn't think it was an amazing book. I didn't
It
think it
was
was a
ADB.
great. Okay, yeah. I don't think it was an amazing introduction to the setting. The main character was. Well, it's funny. The main character was absurdly overpowered, but so is Iskandar Khayan from The Talon of
Huh.
Horus, which is my favorite 40K book.
Correct.
But it was about um, the demon hunting gray space marines that I can't remember the name of now for some reason.
The Grey Knights
Yeah, those ones. The ones that literally have gray in their name. And
and our knights.
the only interesting part of the book, if I remember right, was their conflict with the space wolves. The rest of it was pretty boring, I thought. And then from there, I read the Eisenhorn trilogy, which is a pretty old and pretty. I don't think it necessarily aged great, but I really enjoyed it. About a inquisitor who's knows that one day he's going to go too far and fall to heresy, and just his journey to that point and how he responds to it. It's a very cheesy, not terribly well written book series. I think that was Dan Abnett who wrote that, and I love it so much. I'm very happy that when I got the 40K Magic the Gathering Imperium deck, that it came with a Eisenhorn
Yes.
Intrabale. Well, if I look at Goodreads, my current top 10 books are The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov, which is like satirical, philosophical, religious story.
That is very fitting for you, by the way.
Yeah, it's I think if you read it, you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut, which is more philosophy, contemplation, anguish at people sucking, but also kind of having some hope for humanity. Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, which is among the people who are C.S. Lewis enjoyers, pretty underrated. It's a retelling of gosh, what is it? Psyche and Eros, but with a fantastic C.S. Lewis twist. I'm sorry if I butchered the mythology. I don't know my mythology as well as I should. And then Speaker for the Dead by we're working backward from my favorite to my least favorite. Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card, which is the number 2 of the Ender Saga.
Very good books as well.
Yeah, as unfortunate of a person as Orson Scott Card is, it's like the best stuff he
Yes.
wrote is like the opposite of what he actually believes, which is highly unfortunate. Then
Yeah,
Dark Places. Yeah.
I would probably put the first Ender's Game book in my top 10.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal book. And it's the problem is whenever I tell people that I love Speaker for the Dead, usually the response they get is, I don't know what that is. And I say, well, it's Ender Saga Book 2. And they'll say, oh, if you love Ender's Game, you should read Red Rising or something similar. It's like, well, what you're describing is like none of the reason I liked these books to begin with, but I appreciate the
Yeah.
recommendation. And then that book, Dark Places, is by Gillian Flynn. I think that was the book that the teacher recommended to me. But it's a great book. And then Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which is the book that everybody who thinks they're a genius for having read 1984 should read, because it's the one that actually predicts our present situation in the society that we live in. Then Trout
We
Fishing
do
in
live in
America.
one of those.
Yeah. Trout Fishing in America and Other Short Stories by Richard Brautigan. He was one of the beat writers. I only knew of him because Haruki Murakami said that he was inspired by him, and it's just I have it on a list called my weirdness mood list. It's just weird little short stories. I love them, and it's Americana in the best way, in a way that Alex Jones could never understand. Then the guy who was inspired by that previous one, The Wind Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami, all just very dense, long book by a Japanese writer who also happens to be a Westaboo, which is like a weeaboo but in reverse. And then Doctor Sleep by Stephen King. It's the sequel to The Shining. It's my favorite King book. The movie's not quite as good. The book is really nice, I think. That's a pretty unpopular opinion, honestly, but it's whatever. And then Oathbringer by Brando Sando himself.
The Branderson Sanderson.
The sanding man, branding man, even. And so that's the kind of books that we respectively enjoy, and that kind of puts into context what we're going to be continuing to talk about. What is our next topic of discussion?
Yeah, so our next topic of discussion, we kind of chewed through number 3 as we were going through what else we've read. So we're going to jump right into what some specifics about our Sanderson reading habits have been.
Some specifics. Well, almost entirely it's been audiobooks for me. That's almost entirely how I consume books these days because, I mean, it's unfortunate to say this as a writer, but Audible it makes audiobooks affordable because they would be, I mean, back when people bought CD sets regularly, they went from like $60 for a short book to hundreds of dollars for a long book.
Yeah.
Lots of people talk about how they wish we could go back to it being normalized to actually like pay full price for audiobooks, and I don't think that's actually something that anybody is prepared to do, unfortunately. You can still buy them.
Yeah.
It's definitely
I
just
would
not as common anymore.
I would certainly have not consumed as many books as I have if
Yeah.
I was paying full price for audiobooks.
And that 60 to hundreds of dollars was, decades of inflation.
Yeah, that is 2002 money, sir.
Yeah, and maybe that's actually still the price that some of them are these days. Maybe I'm just talking out of my butt and saying, like, maybe there actually are just plenty of people but I would not be able to afford it. And so unfortunately contribute to the society we live in and have an Audible subscription, which I heavily use. And so usually I listen to the book when I'm driving or I'm doing a chore. That's my biggest hobby is doing chores while listening to a book or a podcast. I don't like using physical books because I'm just gonna lose them, leave them places. I'm not gonna be able to take them with me when I go to the store. I can't read them while I'm doing stuff. I understand why people like physical books. They're just not for me. I'll
Yeah,
take an audiobook first and a Kindle book second.
fair enough. Yeah, so on my end, I mentioned earlier that I, at a certain point in time, I had a lot of accessibility to listening to audiobooks. So, about, trying to think of what timeline it is now, about 7 or 8 years ago, I started in the construction field. I am still working in construction, just no longer in the hands on field of things. But when I was working hands on at very repetitive tasks for 8 to 9 hours a day. And that presented itself with an opportunity to chew through between 7 and 8 hours of audiobook every day.
So you know it only takes you a
And
year to get through a Sanderson book at that rate.
I mean, I think I got through Way of Kings before I started in construction. So I was already kind of primed for that scale of audiobook,
Mm.
but I ate the Mistborn books for lunch. Like they're what I think like 24 hours on average or something like that.
I can't remember, but I would not be surprised. I
I'm
wouldn't be
just
surprised if they're longer than that.
just a second here. I think they're around yeah. So even say a 40-hour audiobook,
Mm-hmm.
that is about 1 week worth of
Yeah.
listening to me. So I listen to a lot of Sanderson very quickly. And as one can imagine, when that is primarily what I'm listening to while I'm, working, I got very invested in his work and kind of thought that he was one of the greatest writers of our generation.
Mm-hmm.
I was young.
I mean,
Well,
to be
younger.
fair, he is an
He's,
anomaly, and
yes.
as far as like if you put up a graph of quantity and quality, I still think he counts as one of the greatest fantasy writers of our generation.
Yeah. Um, but that
Even if
is
everything he's written isn't the most amazing, hey,
No, I would agree. I guess when I wasn't consuming much else in terms of literature,
yeah,
it just kind of became like the the media that I
right,
enjoyed was Sanderson. Um, and then my the stuff that I was working on shifted. I was working a little bit more with my brain and less with my hands,
yeah.
and being in that sort of setting isn't 100% conducive to listening to audiobooks, so I slowed down quite a bit. But in the last couple of years, my more casual listening of audiobooks has gone up, and I have listened to some of his newer stuff as well as getting into the Warhammer.
Mm. Do you think that's been helpful for your enjoyment of Sanderson or harmful? The
I
changing patterns and habits.
Yeah, I think taking a break was certainly a good thing. I was getting, I was feeling some sameness burnout
Mm.
by the time I was finishing up in the field. That's about when I was working through Mistborn Era 2, and honestly, I don't believe I have finished the Bands of Mourning,
Yeah,
which is
it's
book 3 of Era 2.
that's I also felt quite a lot of burnout trying to get through Bands of Mourning, but that's also just because it's kind of not an amazing book. in my opinion. It's you get
Yeah.
to the it's really funny that so the I don't know if a discourse is the right word, but you know, Sanderson readers call the climax of Sando books the Sanderlanche.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, he puts quite a lot of work into making the climaxes of his book really exciting. But from the outside, people who are not big Sando fans, which is, if you happen to go on Reddit reading and writing communities, uh, any like meme or circle jerk subculture is spends a lot of time and energy making fun of Brando Sando for good reason, and his fans for even better reason. And there's a recurring thing of like, do Brando fans realize that other writers know what a climax is also? Do Brando fans know what a climax is, or do they think that he invented them? Which I think is funny. And when I read Bands of Mourning, I kind of was not really sharing the thought, but it's like this is the most paint by numbers MCU
Sure.
not even really predictable, but unsurprising. Because in writing excuses, the podcast that Brando was, I don't know if he's on it anymore, but that he had with some other writer friends, the thing they would talk about is how a twist, etc., in a book should be surprising but inevitable. Like you should look at it and you're like, oh, I didn't really expect that was going to happen, but it makes perfect sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
like the ideal timing for a reader to figure out what is happening is like the moment before the characters do it. And because that makes the readers feel like geniuses for having figured it out before the characters, but not so early that they feel it's obvious because they figured it out and now the characters are dumb for not having figured it out. Like
Yeah.
it needs to make perfect logical sense, and you need to smack your forehead and say, "Oh, why didn't I see that coming?" Um,
We saw it coming though.
it was just I don't know if you got to that point in the book in Bands of Mourning, but I just had like such a blank face staring at the screen, like, "Yep, this sure is a Mistborn book climax, all right." That
For
person
sure.
sure is using allomancy to beat up the bad guys and solve his problems. That's
That
pretty
is what he
cool.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for the tangent.
No, you're good. That is what we are here for. Um, let's see. All right. So, what in general, kind of looking ahead, because this is in fact episode -1
Mm,
of the WoK of Kings, the Way of
yep.
Kings of Kings.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
We love
what are
recursive
we?
titles around these parts.
We gosh darn love them. LOL out loud even.
Mm.
What are we kind of looking to get out of this reread exercise? Because both of us have consumed Way of Kings more than once before this juncture.
Um, Technically, I have. I read it once, never wanted to read it again. Specifically, this is going to come up probably pretty frequently as we go through this. It took me like 3 or 4 tries to get through Way of Kings the first time. Specifically, I kept getting hung up on Kaladin's earliest chapters. Um, and it was eventually getting into Shallan doing stuff that got me
Mm-hmm.
finally, and like Dalinar and Adolin, and like realizing that the whole book was not just Kaladin being depressed.
Being
Um,
mopey.
that got me to actually get through the book and like and think this is actually pretty decent. I understand why people read this. And granted,
Yeah.
this was after I'd already read the entirety of Mistborn Era 1. So this I kept trying because I figured that I owed it to Sanderson to keep going, knowing that his attitude writing this book was that he is making choices that wouldn't be acceptable for like a debut author because he's aware he has already bought your trust. Not bought your trust,
Yeah.
but earned it by writing a pretty good trilogy before now.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah,
finally
he
pushed through, and I'm glad that I did, because all of the setup in Way of Kings made Words of Radiance, etc., pretty good. What I want, and so I also, I mean, I just finished my reread of The Way of Kings. I was not really focusing for a lot of it because I was listening to it while having someone else in the car who was constantly talking to me while it was on. That was pretty much the only time I was listening to it, because it was for the sake of listening to a book with this other person.
yeah. Fair enough.
And so I wasn't super focusing the entire time, but there were a lot of moments from like, okay, so I um I remember thinking in a later book, like, when was this set up? And so now I'm seeing that this was actually set up in the first book. Or like, oh, there's a detail that doesn't mean anything in the context of just this book, but it adds a lot of meaning to a later book. And so what I'd like to do is be able to focus on details that do come up later on, and also hear your perspective, because you're going to have noticed things that I missed, and vice versa. So get a better
Yeah.
picture of how this functions as the first book in an extremely long series. And just, share some opinions on things that happen, how we see characters introduced that later develop. Specifically because you've read so many other books in the Cosmere than I have, it'll be interesting to hear from you things that were set up here that pay off in later books. There is, for example, in a later book, there's a mention of ether, and you know a lot more about that than I do.
Yes.
I just thought it was vague reference to
Magic's with a
in
K.
well, I thought it was a reference to just space, like people used to believe that in space ether was the substance between the stars, and that you could like
Yes.
potentially ride on it like you have a boat in the water. And
Yeah.
I'm horrifically oversimplifying, but I just thought that's what it was, because I know there's space travel in this universe. But that's not at all what it is,
Eventually.
right?
No, that is correct. That is not at all what it is. Whether Sanderson had planned out everything that occurs in the Tress and the Emerald Sea novel, which is the novel where we really dig into aethers and how they function and how they fall within the Cosmere. Whether he considered all of that way back in The Way of Kings is, I guess, only Sanderson and his continuity editor really know. But yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the reread will be an excellent exercise to be able to kind of focus in, put our blinders on a little bit, and dig into this book. Myself, as you said, I have kind of consumed a handful more books in the Cosmere and may have some wider perspective. Something else that I will say now and probably in episode 1, I am a unabashed wiki diver myself, and I spoil things for myself quite often.
I do that a lot.
And
I tend not to do it for Sanderson books because I just don't care that much.
sure,
And it seems like whenever I open a Coppermind wiki page,
yes, sir.
I don't get the thing that I had a question about answered, but it opens up 10 other questions, because that's just all these books do.
Yeah,
The only interesting things seem to come not from what has actually been like revealed in book pages, but like just reading interviews and Q&As with Brando
yes.
himself.
Yes, I believe something that I laugh at sometimes is when we have a small article about a passing character that pops up once in a book, and there are 10 references
Right.
throughout the article, and 3 of the references are from the book, and 7 are from book signings and words of Brandon.
Right.
It is really remarkable how that happens.
Despite the fact these books are thousands of pages long, it's remarkable
Yes.
how relatively little information we get of them
Yeah. To put
about
it
the
in
big questions
perspective,
people have.
The Way of Kings, which is the first and
Yeah.
shortest Stormlight book, is something like 48 hours long.
Yeah. It's
That is crazy.
pretty gnarly.
So specifically, I myself am digging into this reread. I'm looking forward to some of the specific notes that tie forward into the Cosmere, as well as actually listening to and analyzing the the chapter in betweens,
Yep, the interludes.
the interludes.
Yeah, I
My
think that'll be interesting. Whenever I sorry to interrupt you, whenever I reread specifically Oathbringer and Words of Radiance, Oathbringer I've reread the most, probably 4 times. I think I've reread Words of Radiance like maybe once before, and then I've just started a new reread. I always skip over the interludes because I just find them not interesting because it feels like as soon as they start to get interesting, we skip to the next one. But I paid more attention to the interludes of Way of Kings when I was doing this initial reread, and I'm interested also to pay attention to them and see what it's telling us about the stuff that's going to happen.
yeah. Um, I will. I'll be interested to compare some notes about characters that may or may not pop up from other novels and kind of see what our thoughts are on that.
Yep.
But I mean, overall, just be happy to reread this and kind of discuss it through with you and see what we agree on and see where our thoughts differ.
Yep. I feel like they're maybe going
Now,
to be differing the most around Kaladin and Shallan.
I think that is potentially correct based on some things that we've talked about before. Yeah, good
at
old Shallan.
least, at least you don't. So there's a certain stereotype of Sando fans who are, let's say, closely associated with stereotypes of like Jordan Peterson fans and Dostoevsky fans.
Ah,
Young men who
yes,
identify extraordinarily with Kaladin in the sense of identifying as someone who has an intense need to save other people. In the
yeah,
same way as, for another book that we have both read, Promise of Jesse Woods by Chris Fabry. In the same way
that
that
is a
that main
book.
character had a tragic flaw which never actually went addressed, where he felt the urge to save everybody around him. Kaladin has
Yes,
that drive. And there is a stereotype of a young man who also decides they have that drive, and that the Stormlight archives have changed and or saved their lives by letting them read those books and go along with Kaladin on his drive of
personal
escaping
journey.
his personal journey instead of going to therapy, which is
Well,
hilariously ironic, of course, given events of the final book. But
actually, just a sorry to interrupt here.
yep.
Tying this back to the MCU, both Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is fairly recent in comparison to the entire MCU,
Yep.
as well as Rhythm of War, both introduce modern therapeutic techniques to the respective universes, which is hilarious. Not that I think therapy is hilarious in itself. I myself regularly go to therapy. It
Yeah.
is a good thing, but I am not necessarily
I think
sure.
that's a whole subject we can talk more about later. It's
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
So you say in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like, so that's a modern day. That's a modern setting show, right?
Yes. It
Because
is.
in whether it was Wind and Truth or it was I think it was Wind in Truth that where it was introduced. Like that's a very literal introduction of modern therapy practices into the universe in a way that I assume isn't the case in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like we can infer that it existed in their universe before the show, just that's the first time we see it, or am I misunderstanding?
Bucky, as the Winter Soldier, has court mandated therapy.
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's just essentially the first time that we're seeing it. It's not like someone invented it in universe in that
No,
show, right?
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
also in Endgame they were having group therapy in the beginning, right? That was like the first scene with Captain America, like leading
That
the group.
is that is true. Um that is true. I suppose
I feel like
um
maybe even Iron Man, and maybe that was an Iron Man 2 thing. I don't know.
um
I'm sure I'm wrong about that.
yeah, I believe, and I may very well be wrong about this, but
Yeah.
I believe Falcon and the Winter Soldier is the first time that the like that we see a person go to a therapist and talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
therapy stuff.
Interesting.
Endgame, I think, handled the just topic of therapy a little bit
Yeah.
better
It
because
was
they're
also
sitting
like
down
one
and
scene.
discussing. Yeah. Um, it's whole tangent. In
Yeah.
short, therapy is good. Not necessarily sure if I need a character saying I'm his therapist in my
Yeah.
Cosmere novel, but
It's
will
we'll get
that's
there in we'll get there in some number of years, and maybe
yeah.
by the time we get there, I'll have a very different opinion on it. I mean I agree with you. Therapy is a helpful tool in the real world. Um, I don't think it worked well in that book, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
What were we talking about?
Um,
Stuff we were probably going to disagree on, or maybe
yes.
agree
Yeah.
on. Yeah, so I was
Um,
talking about the stereotype of the Kaladin worshippers, essentially. And I think I was just on a dumb tangent in saying, at least you're not the kind of person who is like, bro, everybody gotta read this book series. It will change your life. It will give you a new outlook on reality. And like, the ultimate expression of the stereotype is guys who refuse to go to therapy trying to
hmm,
get their girlfriends to read The Way of Kings because they say that it changed their life and their girlfriends need to read it so they can also understand. And the
those
girlfriends
guys have
being like,
girlfriends.
bro, what? I mean, yeah, that's a whole other subject.
Yeah. Uh, Sorry, that was a fierce tangent we kicked down.
Yeah, but it's good.
All right.
That kind of tangent I think is going to be the strength of this podcast.
Yes.
It's why you got
Yes.
us instead of just reading from a wiki page or Chat GPT or whatever.
I solemnly swear I'm not an AI, as far as I know.
I can make no promises.
All right. The last point that we'll discuss here, um, and we kind of started to brush this a little bit. Do you have a favorite character in specifically The Way of Kings?
That's
And
tough. Yeah, yeah, sorry, I
do
should
you
interrupt you.
expect that's all right. Do you expect that to change by the time that we kind of wrap this review, this reread session up?
That's very tough because I think, going back to our previous talk, I think
Yes.
Shallan has the highest highs in this book. She also has a lot of really dumb scenes, especially her first few scenes.
Hmm.
If I were to say the character who has the highest highs, it's Shallan. If I were to say the character who's consistently the best, I think that's Dalinar. I think he's my second favorite character in the whole series altogether. And I think he just has the consistently highest quality in this book.
I would agree. In that Dalinar is the most consistent character in this book. I personally, and as we go through this, we will dig into it a little bit more. I do not fantastically like Shallan
Oh
in
yeah, I
this
think
book.
I won't say most people. She's probably the most consistently people's least favorite character for some good reasons
Yeah.
and some bad reasons. Mostly bad reasons, but
I yeah. The I think a lot due to where I was in life and mentally when I first listened to this book.
Hmm.
Kaladin is my favorite character in this book. I recognize there are a lot of things that are quite cringy, and as you said, there are some Jordan Petery sorts of
Peters.
things that that we can get into as we go. But um, I I feel overall Kaladin is my favorite character. Um,
I
I
definitely think he similarly has high highs and low lows in terms of me wanting to read him, similar to
yeah.
Shallan. Like some of the Kaladin's highest highs in here are, to my surprise, as I was rereading, higher than I think they get in Wind and Truth in particular, and for
Hmm.
um, most of
Rhythm of
Rhythm
War.
of War.
Yeah.
Like his desperately trying to save people is much more justifiable in this context than it is later on, which is kind of to some degree the point of the last couple of books, is the fact that it's not healthy for him to keep doing that when he's no longer in a crisis of physical emergency where everybody around him is going to die horribly if he doesn't do something.
Yeah.
But that's actually the case in this first book. And
Yeah.
so once you get
It
past the ridiculousness of once you get past the brutal first couple chapters, once you get past the absolute corniness of him trying to lift people's spirits up and it working, when you get to him in the moment just thinking somebody has to do something, if it's not me, who's it going to be, and then it working, that is the best that Kaladin's character gets in the whole series.
and as I will add on to that, there are situations where he feels that somebody has to do something and he steps up and it doesn't work.
Yes.
And as obviously as we go through, we will get to that. But um, that is something that really draws me to his character, is that when he steps up to the plate, he doesn't always hit home runs.
Mm-hmm.
You
And
know, he
and it's
sometimes the
sometimes
baseball
it's unfortunate
actually,
in the later. Sometimes it's unfortunate in
yeah,
later books when he doesn't hit. It's like, oh, Brando, why'd you have to do him like that? You didn't have to do that.
he
Why is
doesn't
Kaladin
have to.
sitting in the chair in the corner? That didn't need to happen. Ugh.
Now, I don't 100% expect Kaladin as my favorite character to
Mhm.
change. I expect my appreciation of Shallan's character to change as we go through it, because I will be discussing this with you as I listen through it.
Yeah,
And I know that our stances on her as a character differ a bit. So
and I think
I
it.
look forward.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
also
I
look
look forward
forward
to that.
to. Sorry.
You're good.
I also look forward to pretty much the inverse. Um, I look forward to being able to see some of the elements I didn't like rereading Kaladin. Maybe seeing them from a different perspective will help me appreciate them better. So I
Yeah.
expect I'm going to like Kaladin more by the time we're done with this. I
And we
don't
both can agree that Dalinar just
Yeah,
is a good character.
he's just built different. That's kind of his whole thing.
He
It's
to
really funny reading people talking about him as the greatest and most honorable of all the Alethi and all the Light Eyes
yeah.
in context of what comes later, but that's kind of
Well,
why it works so
tech,
well, because he does actually reflect
technically
that.
in the timeline he comes earlier, so
Uh,
you
hmm.
know.
Oof. Oof. Anyway, we'll get
Um
there. Some years in
yeah.
the future. Yeah,
Uh,
Dalinar is just fantastic throughout this entire book. There's a
he
couple
does
there are a few cheesy moments with him, but
yeah.
he's his moments are all good. Even when they're bad, they're still good.
Something that I think we both agree on is that the local sayings, right? Part of the world building
Mm.
is like instead of people saying like uh, "Holy cow," for
Hmm.
instance, they say "Stormfather," or
Yeah,
instead of
people
saying
saying storms every 3 seconds, or the one thing that's funny about Dalinar on reread is him saying "blood of my fathers"
"Oh my
every four
goodness,"
seconds. Like, yeah, we
I
get it. Your fathers were people with blood. I
I just
understand.
listened to one of the chapter portions where he's getting flirted with
Yeah.
by another character, and legitimately within 5 minutes, I believe we had close to 2 dozen "Blood of my fathers"
Yeah,
uttered,
it's
and
pretty hilarious.
it was fantastic.
It's really funny
Um,
when conservative religious people in general say like, "Oh, nobody really swears except for foul-mouthed people. It's not difficult to not have swearing in your vocabulary." I don't think you really need to have people swear to have realistic dialogue, which that's a whole other debate. But then you have this Mormon man with the freedom to put in as much swearing as he wants because it's all imaginary, like swearing as much as
yeah,
uh uh
construction worker.
construction worker, and as you know, as a northeastern construction worker, especially, that's an especially high standard.
Yeah, it's like when you go away to summer camp
Yeah.
as a 14-year-old for the first time, and you realize that when there's no adults around, you can say whatever you want. So your
Oof.
vocabulary becomes incredibly slanted one way, and then it's a whole thing. But
And
blood of my
anyway,
father,
in any
storms,
way,
storm father.
by the Lord Ruler is just a basic part of my vocabulary now. In summary,
I mean, that one is pretty solid. Let's be fair, and it was utilized a bit less volumetrically.
you can just
And
rattle it off with so much dripping emphasis on whichever word you want. It's just such a fun phrase.
oh, it's great.
You can even sneak in a by the Forgotten Gods if you really need to.
Oh man, maybe in 3 years when we finish this up, we'll go through and do a Mistborn next and
We're
kind of cleanse our
Oh,
palate.
there's so much stuff we can do. Ugh, cool boy.
Alrighty, so that is all of the bullet points that I had to discuss.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we're certainly looking forward to doing this. We have generally discussed quite a bit in terms of different literary things we like, kind of different literary analysis.
Give people an
But
idea of kind of what perspectives they can expect us to come
yeah,
at this project with.
yeah, it definitely some shared interests between the two of us, some different backgrounds and where we're coming from and things like that, different uh, different amounts of Sanderson that we've listened to, so we could get some slightly different perspectives,
Hmm.
and yeah, just kind of starting to introduce ourselves and how we work with each other, and I'll say I'm definitely looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining me for this and for leading in the questions, my brother. I look
Sure
forward
thing.
to the next time we're able to meet up for this. But for now, keep on walking, because as they say constantly throughout this book series, journey before destination.
Journey before destination, my brother.